Welcome everyone to today's social system mapping deep dive session for June 19th, 2023. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, and Kara Martner is our tech support and producer. And what this is for those of you who are new, which is Jeffrey, just acknowledging that, it's a vision about a possibility, the possibility being that this methodology that we're developing and learning and together the possibility is that social system mapping can help change networks, transformation groups, et cetera, become self-organizing more quickly and become more impactful than they would without a social system map. It's also a learning opportunity. We're all have parts of the puzzle of this developing emergent methodology. And so this is an opportunity for us to both learn about social system mapping itself, as well as all the pieces that that support social system mapping. It's a community of practice. There are a bunch of us who get together regularly and think about the field and mapping and method and et cetera. And so mapping, the technical aspects of mapping is core to this work, but we're not all mappers. A lot of us don't do the technical stuff, but do more the visioning stuff, the sense-making stuff, the social process stuff. And so however you're entering into it, we welcome you. So let's do some brief chat intros. I'm going to stop sharing now. Go ahead and just put in the chat your name, location. What else do we usually do there?
Pronouns.
Pronoun.
And your network.
That's
Your
number
network.
2 on the list.
Sorry.
You can put your network with your
All right.
a network that you're supporting or part of or working on. A network, probably you don't show up here if you don't have some kind of context of a network in mind. So we'd love to know about that as well. And Jeffrey's in Texas. And no, Rebecca's used to be in Texas, but she's not with us. And if you haven't, if there's anybody in the group that you don't know much about and want to check them out on the chat, that's great. And then the last question is, so what brings you here today? What piqued your interest, or what would you hope to come up? And here's Rebecca. And you can put that in the chat as well. Welcome, Rebecca. We are introducing ourselves in the chat. If you want to put your name, pronoun, location, network you're working with in the chat, and also what brings you here today. Of course, this is always an invitation. It's not a command. If you're like not in a typing mood, feel free to ignore any suggestions. And with that, I am going to, so our producers today are the people who are leading today's session are Jim Best and Mary Roscoe, and you two could just wave. I'm not good with introductions, both myself or anybody else, so we're just going to let them do that for themselves to the degree they want to, and I'm going to hand it over to Jim and Mary.
All right. Mary, I'm just going to jump in without introducing ourselves any more than that, all right? This is really exciting for me because it taps off like several months of work that Mary and I have been doing. But just to frame it, Mary did some work thinking about all the maps that people have brought into this this community of practice on Monday mornings, and wanted to get them organized, and pulled out all the information about each one of them into a table. And she presented that a month ago at the last deep dive. And I got excited about what she was pulling out of there, and it combined with what I was trying to do, which was people always ask, why are these maps valuable? And so I piggybacked on her work, and that's what I'm presenting today. So let me share my screen and get onto my slides here. So, and this will be a little bit messy here, but this is today's agenda here. I'll just frame it one more minute, and then we'll just do some pair shares about your networks, what you're involved in. And you'll see the analysis that I did, and then the kind of sense making I did out of it. And then we'll go back to your story about how you think about using maps. Then we'll close, and that's 60 minutes. And then if you want to hang on after that, we'll be here for a half hour, and you can just sort of talk about whatever has either come up or what's up for you. So the thing I wanted to do today was just to show how the work that we do can build on, that we can build on each other's work. So in this community of practice, it's not just individual maps, but it's the maps and what we make of them and what we make of making of them and so forth. So I want to build that ecosystem of fueling itself regeneratively. But the focus question is how have mappers in this community of practice use their maps? So we're going to start out with a pair share here, and it's just going to be, I want you to take a minute. What are some of the ways that we use maps, and how do you anticipate using maps? So I want you to just take a minute to reflect, and this will be 1 minute. Think about a network you care about, or that you're part of, that you work with, or you're curious about. Think about the changes that you and your co-conspirators want to affect within that network. So what's the purpose? And then think about how you hope to achieve those changes. That would be kind of your theory of change about that network. If you do this, then we hope this will change. And so the question you're reflecting on ultimately is, how might you use a map to help with these changes? So take just a little bit of time about that. The network, what its purpose is, what your theory of change is about that, and how you might use a map. And we're going to break into pairs. And if you don't have something, don't worry about it. So I'm not looking to see if everyone's come back.
I think they have.
But I could stop sharing there. Welcome back. Sorry about that abrupt entry. Kara and I got our signals crossed, but I hope you had a good run through there. So you're going to go into another set of dyads with someone else, and you get a chance to reflect differently this time on the same question about how you might use a map to help with the changes that you think are important to move your purpose along in the network that you picked.
Jim, did you say a different dyad?
Yeah.
Okay. Are they carry? Okay. I wasn't seeing. Sorry, wasn't tracking.
All right, let's try her again. 2 minutes each way, and then we'll go on. All right, I think we're all back. Good. Well, I hope that stoked your mind. It was just to get you thinking in terms of purpose, theories of change, and mapping. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the content here. Kara just shared the slide deck, and you can follow along on the slides. I'm going to give you a visual here, but there's links in the slides, and so you can click on those links and get to the other pieces. This next piece is going to be kind of dense, but we're only going to do 10 minutes here. So I'm just going to jump in. You see my slide here, right? Let me make this a little smaller here. So, you know, we have all of these people in the community that do maps and are intensely interested in how those maps serve their purposes in their communities, and they're constantly changing things so that it serves them better. And that exists out there in the COP. But Christina set up these Mondays where people can come in and do those presentations. So there's been 114 of those. And Kara has, if you, I don't want to click on it. If you click on that link, you'll see what she's put together here. Like through the pandemic, there are lots of material that is now part of this available to us in the COP. The videos and the chats for all of these presentations, many of which are about specific maps. So, you know, here's COP, our access to those maps because of the work that Kara did, because of the work that people did that in you know, presenting these things. So then Mary goes ahead and extracts out of those 26 that are good examples of maps in which she's able to look at the purposes. And she, oops, I'm sorry. She put them in this link here, exploring use cases, and here's all 26, and we've got them numbered here in reverse numerical order so we can keep track of them. And we went over this last time in the last deep dive, but there's a lot of columns here that she's extracted that information out of. And so you've now got this host of things in the COP that you can look at the way she has pulled that information out and has links to those presentations as well. In addition, she did a whole set of reflections about those maps. So that brings us up to where I picked it up from Mary. And basically, I am going to, let's see. Oh, the other thing is that, so then she basically created an informal process about cataloging every new map that comes on and is suitable to go into this table. So now we've got an ongoing sustaining piece. So where we are today is a focus on the analysis that I did. And out of these maps that Mary has cataloged there, I discerned like 43 types of map uses out of these 26 maps, and 11 categories of uses and so forth. And so if we dig into that, which we're going to do right now, if you click on that link, you get an overwhelming spreadsheet. But I'll just tell you what it is really quickly here. Here's the 26 different maps. And as I went through each map, I listened to what the authors said that Mary had cataloged about what they said their purpose was, what views they created, what they were trying to achieve. And I started listing them here. So here's one, they were most maps. There's an identity view, right? A visual directory about who these people are, what their contact is, what their demographics are, where they're located. There's organizational identity information. There's their interests and values and so forth. And it's easy as you go through these maps to see how they were using that. And so I iteratively went through a first pass and said, I pulled out, you can see these check marks here. These are the ones I wrote down. And there's a bunch of things that you don't see checked because that didn't show up in the map. But then I looked at the next map and I saw there were some other ones, and I kept adding this. And over time, iteratively, as I went through the 26 maps, and then I went back and re-looked at them because I created new map uses, you see a whole bunch of map uses. These aren't definitive. These are just what I sensed out of it, right? But I started noticing patterns that a lot of these things had to do with finding other people in the community, finding them by their interests, by their intention, by their identity sort of characteristics. And I came up with maybe 11 different categories that were sort of super categories of these specific. And I don't expect you to be looking at these in much detail right now, but this is now a resource that you might look at to look at how do those 44 different uses that seem to come from this body of work that we've done, do they resonate with you? Do they give you ideas? Do you think of other uses that you would use in your maps and so forth? And these categories were kind of interesting because it helped me think. I mean, it's pretty hard to think about these 44 things, but it's a little easier to think about 11 different things about finding people in your community, about understanding their context, understanding what kind of flows are moving between people. What are maps that help in sense making? You know, program evaluation is something that people have often done in maps. And not a lot of people have done that here, but participatory action research, just about connecting, relationship building, doing events, collaboration, systems change, all of those become sort of categories of use and the kind of maps that people use to get to that. And then last thing I'll say is, as I was starting to look at that, I started thinking in terms of our adaptive action cycle from human systems dynamics, that a lot of this is about observation, about what are we seeing? And so what does this mean? And now what are we going to do about it? So that I might have been forcing the categories there, but it was just interesting to think that these maps have different purposes there. So that's, I think, all I'll say about that. And again, the intent is you have access to this spreadsheet for whatever it's worth, and it may be useful in generating map ideas for you. And that may be useful in you doing a map, which then gets recycled back into the community. So let's just take a minute or two and either in the chat or just pop off mic. Any what are you noticing? What does this mean to you? Any kind of reflection. We just have a minute or two for this. Don't be shy. Thank you, Seth, for the wow.
Yeah, sorry. I have a quick reaction, which is, first of all, I think this is terrific, and I applaud the work that both of you did on this. The question that came to my mind, when you have so many of these finding uses, that there's the question of the reciprocal relationship of finding, which is like how people are participating in order to be found. You know, it's like when people put their information in about themselves or about the relationships, part of the motivation is so that others can find them. And so there's some subtle distinction here about finding and being findable. I don't know what the language is, and I would like to understand that more deeply in order to know how to motivate people to participate more actively in the mapping process.
I'm curious, Christine, do you have a thought about that?
I think that what was coming to me was, that's another line, being found, like, and that's a big question, Seth. And I think that that's a key thing that I think we've sort of lost track of in our mapping, in everything, just assuming that people are going to want to be found, or assuming that they're going to be happy to be on the map, and not really thinking about what do they, you know, how to help that be more obvious to people, what an opportunity that is to be found. And so I think that's a good gap for us to think into. So thanks for that.
And the thing it makes me think of is, you know, it suggests an activity that you find somebody on the map, you're sitting there, and then you reach out to them. I found you because you have an interest that it looks like is really aligned with mine. I'd love to talk with you. And that's the piece of connecting and network weaving that is really where things start to happen. So good points there. Rebecca's got, Rebecca, do you want to say what's going on there?
Yeah, just listening to Seth, I was thinking about how I'm a perpetual LinkedIn lurker. I just sort of reside in it and hope no one will bother me. And then other people are continually posting, and I mean, and Facebook, of course, even more so. And the one benefit of that is you know who wants to be seen.
Yeah.
Versus, I mean, maybe this reflects a somewhat extractive mindset I bring to networks. I join just so I can see other people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting in categorizing as extractive. And then how does that shift over into relational as soon as you do reach out and you say, hi, I'm here.
Or someone reaches out to you.
Right.
And you like them. You know.
Or someone notices two people in a network and say, I know both of these people, they should talk.
Yeah.
That kind of weaving and then creating that invitation, June Holly style, saying, hey, you guys, or join me at lunch. I want the two of you to really, so we could spend a lot more time, we should, but as usual, I'm packing way too much in. So we're gonna move to the next piece here. So I'm still sharing my screen, sorry about that. But so the next piece is sort of what did I make of that? And if you go back to this and go to the other tab, this one now, I don't know if you noticed, but you get all these check marks here for all these different maps with this particular use, like row 2. And so I just summed it, found out how often that happened. And then I sorted by frequency, and it's clear some of these things happen more often, right? So now I'm starting to go out on a limb here, but I'm, sense making all, at home at night, looking at this, not collectively, but we would love to do this collectively. And I'll get to that later. But what came up for me is that these are, I said VD, visual directory. This is sort of visual directory kind of uses that almost everybody does. It's like, who are we? What are we interested in? How are we bedded in context? Want to see beyond the network horizon, see beyond the 20 people that I can see in this community, because there's 150 of us. What are you trying to do? Those kinds of things show up everywhere, and that's what comes up in a visual directory, in an asset map, in a relational map. And then there's and you can see it pops up quite a bit here. And then there's kind of another tier here that I distinguished, saying it's visual directory, but it's a little richer: skills, relationship strength, collective sense making. That's what that S&M is there. Person-to-person connections, offers and asks, community building, event support, co-production or co-collaboration. Those are something that you use the visual directory for, but then you're starting to get more invested in purpose and outcomes. So I just called it that. And then there's sort of an intermediate level and an advanced level of where the kinds of things, the kinds of uses get a little more nuanced and require a little more sense making in the collective. And that happened less in these maps. And then there's a bunch of scattered stuff that I don't think is exactly a category, but it's just, they don't come up very much. Anyway, it just, at some point take some time in thinking about that. This is just to be thought-provoking. So I'm going to make a segue here where I'm really going out on a limb. And this is to the explainer graphic that we've used to talk about, this social system mapping theory of transformation that we have. We start out in the void here. And you can see, I'm going to walk through this very quickly. a group of people that are loosely connected by some kind of purpose, but not necessarily interacting so much. They start to interact with each other, start influencing and impacting each other. A group of people sort of shifts up from a meta perspective and says, let's look at this group and what it can be doing. And they start talking to each other. They start interacting with the group by doing, hey, let's build some structures. Let's meet on Thursday nights. Let's talk about, and the group starts to form in this sort of cycle of adaptive action that these people that are thinking about the community start creating structures and possibilities. And at some point they go, gosh, the community is so big, let's have some kind of a map that helps us think about it. And so maybe they think of a social system map, and people start contributing their information to that map, and they start looking and using it as a visual directory. And that's the point where I'm thinking a lot of those maps in that first tier of visual directory are using it in this way. Going further, people start using the map in a more relational kind of way, start doing that, some of that network weaving. So maybe they go into visual directory plus type uses, or maybe they go into more of an intermediate where they're starting to think it's not just people are no longer just individually using it, but collectively more people are joining this center and thinking about the whole community, the community as a whole, and what kinds of map uses might be most important and how they might change the map to reflect the uses that they need there. And then at some point, the community is thinking not only relationally, but also more systemically about how the whole community itself can be reflected in a map, and how those maps can be used to move the community forward with their purpose. I think I'm at the end of that. In fact, I think that's where I also, there's I put some information about how I did the mapping. There's a coding piece, and then there's also more about these tiers. But I think that's enough of that. And I'm inviting you to open up, come off mic. What are you noticing? What does this mean to you? And we have a couple of minutes. Again, don't be shy.
Brian had his hand up.
Yeah, just go for it. We're a pretty small group.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this could be developed into an ecology of maps, because like with my organization, California Donut Economic Coalition, it's potentially we could have donut chapters across the state of California. Each one would have its own unique needs and abilities and capacity, but would still be looking to other people, how to develop. And each one would be at different stages of development. So, this looks like it could be, you could think about it over an overall system about how to not just work on the individual nodes within the map, but with the maps themselves and how to develop that further.
We going to respond?
Go.
Go. Okay. What I was thinking of is, as a consultant working with others that I want to get engaged with the map, thinking about it almost as a life cycle. So they've fully embraced it as a visual directory. So how can I encourage them to move to the VD plus? And then how can I encourage them? And so I could almost see it as a tool to think strategically about helping them advance in their use of it.
I think that's a really excellent point. The idea of your community moving through a maturity cycle, they're only ready for something at certain points after they've absorbed. And so we build these maps with a lot of views and going like, oh, we could do this, we could do that, because that's that little group up top thinking that, but the community isn't there. And we run into it over and over, and people have to develop the language, the visual language, the idea of thinking together about the map, doing collective sense making, and all that has to be facilitated by people who are thinking about the community and then drawing people in. A really good point. And I think it's where a lot of our maps get stuck, that we don't either put sufficient energy into doing that facilitation and the patience and knowing that, and looking for the people who will become champions and go like, whoa, I use this map to pull their excitement into the. We're going to just segue into the last piece here. And we've got, 10 minutes to sort of stretch out, as they say in jazz, to stretch out into this next section, which is basically about your story. What is this suggesting? Amy started with that, about suggesting what this means for you and your work.
I can piggyback a little bit on what Amy said as I'm working to introduce this whole concept. I'm actually thinking of changing the language a little bit. That like the COP that has like 7 or 8 different maps, and it's kind of like, I'm thinking of calling it an atlas, which is a number of maps, and then your atlas can be as thick or thin as you'd like it to be.
Hey, Tom, can you just let people know what kind of network you're talking about so they can visualize what you're.
Yeah, so working with and Amy and I are in the same market a little bit with churches or groups of people that are trying to unify churches on behalf of a city. But everything we're talking about, there's zero, just in my experience, zero understanding of this, and everything's new. So it can be very overwhelming at the beginning. So we're both trying to introduce, and Amy's ahead, she's done more of it, but introduce the visual language and that of relationship into the place, but it's a slow go.
You might see Denise's hands up.
Please.
Yes, thanks. Thank you. I'm actually still back on the very, very first question and the kind of conversation response between Seth and Rebecca, and this idea of being found and not being found, and thinking about my network. And when I met with Seth and Jeff was telling them that we're just building out our map. And what I found interesting was Seth's question and Rebecca's response, and thinking it through the lens of LinkedIn. And in LinkedIn, I'm thinking for myself, maybe when I'm explaining the map to people, and in order to get sustainability with the map, is kind of might help to explain what it's not. And I think in so many ways, our community maps are not LinkedIn. We are the product in LinkedIn. There isn't a bigger community we're thinking about, right? Like LinkedIn is almost the opposite of that. It's all straight about networks, like networking, and not thinking about the community. And so I think that's actually, for me, a good segue to say, to the extent in which you want to be found, it's why do you want to be found? In LinkedIn, we want to be found because we want a job. We're bragging because we want a job. And yes, we have lurkers too, right? I'm a lurker in every social media platform. But I'm just thinking like the interest in LinkedIn is about you. It is about me. I am the product. Whereas from a network weaving perspective, we need to be clear to people when they join the membership, or whom we invite to be part of the map. Why are they being part of this map? And it's the community we should be forefronting, not just us. But I just thought, and thinking in the back and forth, kind of using when I'm talking about, I'll say, this isn't LinkedIn, it can be a LinkedIn, but it's really about the purpose of the network and how we can constantly see it. And then that might help explain, Seth, why people want to be found or not. Like, do you want to be found to support the network? Then that's why you should be there, not just about extracting or getting a job. But this has been like a great presentation, but it's just the questions that you raised and thinking it through, it was helpful for me in trying to identify what it's not. And it's not just the directory, and it's not just, here, look at me, get me a job, or, you know, strictly an exchange. So that was it. But I might have to leave exactly at 12 before the goodbye. It's like a little bit before 12, but thanks.
Thanks, Denise. So before you go, do you mind saying what your network is and sort of what its purpose is?
Oh, yes, sorry. So I'm in Canada and Ontario, and I'm part of the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities, and it was set up as a backbone organization to support executive directors in the Black nonprofit sector who are doing different types of work to support Black families and communities. So we're issue agnostic in the extent that we support the executive directors to do their jobs better in terms of helping them with capacity building, governance, and convening. So we're kind of positioned to encourage conversation and break down the silos. And we're also trying to introduce the practice of systems change, but not using such technical jargon, and the practice of data collection and breaking down silo work in more intentional collaborations with within the sectors, both in the province and across. And I was saying, I think the map can be a beginning place for people to at least see at the very basic level who's doing other work, and then to think about more deeply, why are we doing the work that we're doing, and how can a map help with systems change, which is why I love the explainer graphic so much. So that's the work that we're trying to do.
Thanks. That's such a juicy nugget of, because everybody knows LinkedIn, but to be able to distinguish about what's different about these maps versus that, that's just very nice. What else we've got? We've got time here.
Christine had her hand up.
Yeah, I'm not so good at seeing the hands. So just go for it. Where'd Christine go? Oh, there she is.
She's jumping around.
No, I put my hand up and that puts me
Yeah.
the top. I wanted to build on what Denise just said, and I think that this is part of what this whole conversation is, like the difference between LinkedIn and a social system app points to part of my gut level sort of rejection of social network analytics and of taking not to not use them, but if we lead with analytics and we lead with evaluation, we're telling people this map is not for you, it's for somebody else to evaluate you or extract something from you. And that's why I'm always sort of hammering on, we have to help the network members see the value to themselves, which means we have to start where they're concerned. And if we lead with centrality, etc., we're telling them this is for statisticians, this is not for you, this is for eggheads, and this is evaluation. And so this actually helped me, because I've always had that sort of resistance, like, don't lead with that, don't use it, but keep it in the background, keep it for the eggheads, do not lead with it. And I've had this like very strong gut reaction, and this chain of what Seth brought up and then what Denise brought up just sort of made that get really clear in my head. Oh, that's why I go there. That's why I actually get like a little physically triggered when people start hammering on analytics, because the message is not the message that is going to help your map thrive and stay alive. It's the message that will kill the energy in it, unless they're very sophisticated and you handle it really well. But as a general concept, it often feels really undermining. And I know that there are SNA people here who love that stuff. And so I'm not trying to be, I value it, but I feel strongly about not leading with it, with the community.
Thanks, Christine. I can see a deep dive on this topic coming up somewhere. That would be fun.
And I continue to enjoy my diverging perspectives relative to Christine. And one of those is having more, a more positive reaction to having people who have expertise. Not everyone chooses to invest the time in developing, to share information that is useful to everyone. And the commonality that comes to my mind is brokerage, that when I look at networks, I tend to think of them, I mean, networks can be too dense, right? Sometimes what you want actually is a more efficient pattern of connection because it all takes time. But generally, I look at a map and I think, who would benefit from being connected in a new way? And I think as well of the sharing maps with communities in terms of brokerage with some people who have invested in learning the technical aspects of collecting and portraying the information, transparently brokering between that and distilled information and the people, the community members who are interested in what that might mean for them. I think I remain cautious about the prospects of the majority of members of any community that have a purpose, like, you know, faith-based or environmental or other, being also interested in mapping per se.
Yeah. You know, two thoughts that strike up for me is one, not only is the collective in its some stage of evolution, but all the people in it are at different stages. So you've got to work with both of those simultaneously. And I'm going to quickly look at this thing that I think you were just bringing up, Rebecca. So if you look down here, how there is nothing in these that came out about people using it from an F&A perspective, social networking analytic perspective. The closest thing I can see, maybe I'm missing something, is network weaving, where maybe you're looking for the influencers or the brokers because you want to use a weaver. As a weaver, you might want to see who those people are so that you might appeal to them to push an idea or to ask them about something. Who do you go for advice to? Knowing that is, you know, you can use analytic tools to do that, but you can also see that only 3 maps stated that as a purpose. So it's just interesting. And I think this is a rich conversation to have going forward. We've still got about 2 minutes before I want to switch back to Kara and Christine to wrap us up. Your story, I'm loving hearing how people. Jeffrey, do you have a place that you want to, your voice has not been heard?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is a great discussion. I'm new to social network analysis and mapping in general. I was telling Rebecca and Denise that I work for, I think in contrast to much of you in the private sector, I work for Merck Millipore, which is a pharmaceutical company. And right now I'm trying to understand how large biopharma manufacturers come to their purchase decision-making process. So to that end, I'm getting out a survey in order to understand their network, individual roles, influence within the network, and how we can get them to, how we can target specific people within that network in order to purchase from us. So sort of network weaving from what I understood that you just talked about. And that's kind of where I'm at in my sort of social network analysis and mapping process journey.
Well, welcome to this community. This is a very different sort of approach to mapping. That social network analytic path has been, Denise had to go, has, you know, has, and we use the terms extractive in the sense of
Sure.
top down. And this is the way, it's the way I came into mapping, you know, organizationally, and some of us, but this whole shift is about centering the relationships between people and building a community of connection. So it's hopefully this will be an interesting journey.
I hope
for
so.
you. We're at the 5-minute mark. I think this was great. I really enjoyed this. Kara, do you want to? Oh, let me just. So yeah, I encourage people to explore these materials. You've got all the links from the slides. This is, this is community property at this point. And there's this, I wanted to show this, the richness that's developed from all of this work that people have done, and then the ways of munching on it collectively. It gets richer and richer as we add to it. So, there's an invitation to redo any of this work. This was just a shot that Mary and I did. Maybe Mary's been thinking about what new fields might be in her table. I'm certainly thinking about recoding this because I think the outcome was valuable, but it would be much more valuable if there were like 5 of us thinking and munching through what these views are. So I'd love to code this, go back and code this with a small team. If any of you are interested, reach out to me. There's an invitation to interview the map authors, actually go back for more detail on what their intended uses were. Mary was just taking what they presented in this hour. She was doing sense making, saying, yes, this, not this, but it'd be great to go back to the authors. There's an invitation to chase after other maps that are not been presented, that are either private maps that people bring into the community or they just didn't present. And then think about the regenerative possibilities about what are other ways we can build and then make content available to the community. And that very process of doing that with other people builds relationship as well. So that's it. And then Kara, I think we're on to your last slides.
I don't typically share them, but I can try to hop in there.
Oh, do you want me to share?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Okay. Oh, I am sharing. No, I'm not sharing. Jeez. There they are.
Well, great. And I already threw the links in the chat, so I think we have those. I corrected the deep dive because it was accidentally June. The July one should be that last one.
Lots coming up. I'm not used to doing any of these slides either. So get on the map. Get on the map. That's where your entry to the visual directory and more. And did you just post in the, yeah, Kara's posted in the chat. And if you're on the map, update your map, update the connections that you have or you've gotten here today.
Jim, I'm going to jump in because we just have
Please.
a minute. And
Yes.
if you could stop sharing, and I just want to do a quick poll, just see who's jumping off. If you have to stop at the top of the hour. Okay, so what we usually do for those who are stopping at the top of the hour is we all unmute. We do a countdown, 3, 2, 1. I'll do that in just a second, but you're welcome to stick around if you want to have more informal conversation and just pick people's brains. Feel free to stick around as we wrap up, but I like to make sure that we're giving each other our greetings, our blessings for the day. So we just all together say thank you, goodbye, etc. So 3, 2, 1. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks for joining.
Bye.
Awesome.
Have a wonderful rest of the
Appreciate it.
week.
Great
Everybody.
session.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.